Alright, welcome everybody to another fun-filled fusion video of extravaganza of knowledge, hopefully. Thank you all for taking this time to watch my video, and yeah, let's get right into it, shall we? So this week we're talking about the command, thou shalt not steal, and we find this in Exodus 20, and in verse 15 it says, you shall not steal. Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, let's define what stealing is first off. So stealing is the taking of someone else's property that is not your own, and usually without permission. Because if it's with permission, it's borrowing, and if it's without permission, it's stealing. So, yeah, do not steal. I think that's pretty easy to kind of say, and I mean, I feel like Jesus talks a lot about dealing with things with the heart. So it's like, what are the heart problems that come with stealing that we should avoid? So let's look at this in a little bit of a different light, and maybe instead of looking at what we shouldn't do, let's look at what we should be doing. So, you shall not steal. Well, what's the problems that are presented with stealing? Well, number one, stealing disrespects others, because most people, when they have things, have worked really hard to get to the point that they are. They work really hard to obtain the money. It's like if you have someone who works 40 hours a week and they make a certain amount of money, and then you come along and you steal their check for however much, you have just told them that their time is less valuable than your time. Now, they are the ones that did the work. They deserve it. However, you come along and say, no, I deserve it because I do. I didn't work as hard as you do, but my time is more valuable than yours. That is wrong. That is disrespecting of people, and it's just very arrogant and it's very selfish. It's self-focused. Stealing is a selfish act, and it disrespects other people. And so when we're thinking about stealing, we need to make sure that we realize stealing is not necessarily just about us. It's about the other person too. Because Jesus summarizes the 10 Commandments in love God and love your neighbor. And if we're stealing from our neighbor, we are definitely not loving them. And so that presents a problem, is that we need to make sure that we're loving our neighbors. So the way that we love them is by respecting their property and giving to them what is theirs. The other part of it is, on the personal level, stealing is lazy. For one, and laziness is something that the Bible is very much against. There's not a single person in the Bible who is lazy who is seen as admirable. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 literally says, if you do not work, you do not eat. And fun fact, that was actually what was used at Jamestown at the establishing, because there were some nobles that came over and they started establishing the town, and the nobles didn't think they had to do any work because they were nobles. But, they're dying and struggling, and John Smith says, no, it doesn't matter who you are. If you don't work, you don't eat. And that changed their tune relatively quickly. So it's funny when you see biblical principles used in real life and they actually function in an effective manner. Wonder why that is. But yeah, stealing is lazy. We talked about the whole time thing, right? You're saying, I don't need to go work 40 hours a week to make that money, even though I could. I'm just lazy and don't want to, but I'm going to take the money from a guy who's actually worked those 40 hours and deserves it. Because I deserve to sit around and do nothing. That's lazy. And laziness is something that sneaks in a lot of times. And, it's very easy to be lazy nowadays, especially when a lot of things are kind of automated. But yeah, stealing in itself is lazy, and we should not be lazy. The other thing is that it's greedy. Just straight up, it's a greedy act. And so, what is greed? Well, greed is when something is never enough, basically. It's when you just want more, and you want more, and you want more, and it's never fully enough. And I really like how in 1 Timothy 6, it says, Now, godliness with contentment is great gain. And this is something I didn't actually bring up when I taught this lesson on Sunday, and I'm kicking myself for doing it. I didn't talk about being content, but we'll get to that in a minute. But being content is a good thing, because being greedy is bad. And I love how it says in verse 10, 1 Timothy 6:10, it says, "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, from which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves with many sorrows." And the thing about greediness is that it never lets you be happy with what you have. It never lets you be content with what God has given you. And that is something that it's poisonous. And I love how it says, and they pierce themselves with great sorrows. And so greediness is not okay. And like I said, it's never going to be enough. Now, the final thing I want to look at is that all things ultimately belong to God. That's the last problem with stealing. Like I said, the stealing disrespects others. Stealing is lazy and greedy. And on top of it, all things belong to God ultimately. In Genesis, we are told, or we're given it as an ambassadors. Basically this world is on loan. And we were told by God that we are to utilize it and take care of it. But it's for Him. Ultimately, it's His. We don't own it. We are to use it wisely as stewards. And you see that in the parable, the talents. It's like, I don't know why certain people have piles of money that they can dive in, like Scrooge McDuck. Is that reference too dated for my youth? But I don't know why there's people with piles of money that can, dive in it or dive into their money like Scrooge McDuck. I would love to be able to have that amount of money. People like Bill Gates, I've heard it, as I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that if he drops a $100 bill, it's not worth his time to turn around and pick it up. I'm like, that is insane. Or what's the guy who's in charge of Amazon? Pepto-Bismol. Jeff Bismo, something like that. That guy has so much money, and people are getting all over all these billionaires nowadays for various reasons. But God has allotted that those people should have that money, and some of it rightly so. I mean, I know Bill Gates worked his way up. He worked really hard to get to where he's at now, and he does a lot of good for charities and things with his money. He's not a believer as far as I know, but he's still using it for a good purpose. But God has decided that everyone is going to have what they have. And we see this reflected in the parable of the talents, where the master gives to one 10, to one 5, and another one 1. Or is it? Yeah. And he decides who's going to get what, however much. But the thing about that parable is that it says we are to do the best with what we are given. So the guy with 10, it multiplies it. The guy with 5 multiplies it, and the guy with 1 multiplies, or actually he buries it. But that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to use what God's wisely, despite what we would like. I feel like I screwed that up. The talents, it's 5, 2, and 1, I believe. And the guy with 5 doubles it to 10. The guy with 2 doubles it to 4. And the guy with 1 buries it. And the guy with 2 and the guy with 5 are both commended the same way by the master. But the one that didn't use his talent was punished. And so in the same way, we need to understand God decides who's going to have what money. And we may not like it, but it is how it works. God decides ultimately. And so we need to make sure that we are aware of that. But when we steal, we are going against God's design. And we are disrespecting God while we're disrespecting others and while we're hurting ourselves by making ourselves lazy and greedy. And I mean, I personally love heist movies. I don't know what it is about them, but I love watching the Ocean's movies. I love watching The Italian Job. When I can find a heist movie, I don't know why, I just eat that stuff up. But the thing that's funny about the heist movies is, like, even when you see that they're working really hard over the course of however long, they work for 2-3 months to pull off this grand heist, and then they have enough money to retire filthy rich. But the thing about that is you watch them and then they spend all the money and they waste it, and then they need more. That's greed, and not to mention it's laziness, because you're trying to work really hard for a little bit so you don't have to work hard ever again. It's like, that's a form of laziness. And so heist movies, as much as I love them, do not set a good example for life in general. And yeah, don't steal for those reasons. But what do we need to do? Well, we need to learn to be content. I really love in Philippians 4, he talks about, this is in Philippians 4:13 is the verse that everybody takes out of context. The one, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. People use that verse out of context all the time, but when you put it in context, it says, "But I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again, though you surely did care, but you lack opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to be abound. Everywhere, in all things, I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to be abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And so when we're looking at that verse, he's not talking about, passing your exam or whatever it might be. He's not talking about your basketball game. He's talking about being content. He's talking about learning to work with what God has given us and that Christ provides for us through that. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, but it's in the context of being content. We, as individuals, as an American society, are told that we should always be building, always be searching, always be going after that American dream, always chasing. But the truth of the matter is, dreams are often unobtainable, and especially the American one. I don't say that to discourage anybody, but we need to make sure we're chasing after the right dreams. And we need to learn to be content with what we have. Now, there's a difference between being content and being lazy, as I mentioned before, because we can be like, well, I'm happy with what I have, and then never work hard in our lives, ever. We could just accept it. But the thing that's funny, and I learned this when I got married, I'm happy sitting in my living room on a lawn chair with my Xbox and TV on a bookshelf. That's, and I can just sit there and I can be happy. But my wife moved in and she went, this isn't going to do. So now I have 2 couches. Now I have a coffee table. Now I have an actual TV stand. Is it bad to want those things or to work hard to get those things? No, that doesn't go against contentment. There's a difference between working hard to make things better and being lazy. So you can be content with what you have but still strive for greater. Ambition is not a bad thing. We have to make sure that we are ambitious for the right reasons. We're not seeking to get rich for our own sake. We're seeking to acquire money so I can take care of my wife. I'm seeking to acquire money so I can take care of my children, my future children. I'm trying to save up money so my kids can go to college. I'm trying to save up money and work hard so that I can leave money behind to those who come after me. That's not a bad thing. And that doesn't go against contentment. So I want to make sure that we don't get that confused. But we need to seek to be content. And we need to be happy with what God gives us, even if it isn't what we want it to be. And, we should not only be content, but we should also learn to give. And I feel like it needs to be said, we should not be takers. We should be givers. And I know that sometimes people get really nervous when I start talking about giving. And I understand that to my primary audience here, the people I'm making this video for, you don't really have a whole lot to give to begin with because you're a teenager. But giving is not just about finances. It's not just about money. Giving can be about anything that you have. It could be about your skills. It could be about your time. It could be your prayers. We don't have to just give money. However, I will point out that in Malachi 3:8, God literally says, how long shall you rob me? How long shall you rob God? And that's in reference to a tithe. Now, the tithe was something that was set up in the Old Testament, and I personally believe that it still applies to today, although I think it's a little different. The tithe is simply that you're supposed to give 10% back to God. You're supposed to, you're supposed to harvest and you give 10% to the temple for use and you give it to God as a sacrifice. So what that was given for, what the purpose of that was to get the acknowledgement from us that is God's money. God has given it to us. And 10% is really not a whole lot comparatively. So, I mean, if you have $10, you move the decimal point over one place, it's $1 out of 10. It's really not that much. But I want to make sure that we're clear here. The tithe there is a good guideline, in my opinion. And I feel like we should answer to God for what we give, and we need to make sure that we're being honest with God and our conscience, because in 2 Corinthians, it says we shouldn't be giving out of obligation. We should be giving because we want to be, because in 1 Corinthians it says God loves a cheerful giver. And so when we're giving, it shouldn't just be, oh, I guess I have to give my 10% to God. It should be, I'm giving this to God because He gave it to me. And I personally think 10% should be the lowest amount. That's just me. I believe it predates the law. And so because it predates the law, it still stands for us today. However, I'm willing to or go with that. However, I do know people that give more than 10%. I know people that give 20 or 30% of their paycheck to the church. And that's amazing. And I'm really glad that God has put that on their hearts to do that. And I'm not saying that we should be giving in order to secure my own job, because frankly, I am paid through the generosity of others. But I'm saying it because God has asked us to give. And if you aren't comfortable giving to a church because you think that they're just going to misuse the funds, or you think they're going to, like we're just trying to line our own pockets by what you guys give us, I understand that. But I would encourage then, find a charity that you like and give the money to them. There's Child Evangelism Fellowship, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, the food banks in the area. I think we got 2 or 3 of them. Homeless shelters. They could all use your funds. So you don't necessarily just have to give to the church, but I would encourage you to give to someone and bless someone through that. Bless someone in the way that God has blessed you. And I know people, I want to make sure that as I'm saying this, we shouldn't be foolish with the way we give money. I was told one time of a gentleman who was at work, and he didn't make a whole lot of money, but a guy walks up to him and gives him this whole sob story. My wife and kids are in the car, we ran out of gas, something. Could you help me out? And so the gentleman gives him, looks in his pocket, he finds some loose cash, and he goes, yeah, you can just have this. And so he gives him, like $7 or $8, something like that. Enough, a good amount for gas, especially, that's 40, 50 miles, maybe 60, depending on the car you have. And he gets off work later and goes and sees the guy who was begging for money sitting on the curb drinking a bottle of liquor. And so we need to make sure that we're not letting people take advantage of our generosity, especially in a way that might be hurtful to them. And so I've heard stories of people, they've come up to them and been like, hey, I could really use a meal. Could I have some money for a meal? And the person will either A, carry gift cards to different restaurants and just give it to them, or I've heard this, that they've walked them to the restaurant themselves and purchased a meal for them. You see, we can be giving without being foolish. And so we need to make sure that, we give, but we don't give in a way that might hurt others or make us look foolish. So we need to make sure that we're being responsible with the way that we give. And I know that there are people out there that they will pull money out of their paycheck, and they are going to give that money away that week. And I really respect people that do that. And I wish, frankly, that I had the funds to do that, but I just don't right now. Hopefully at a later time. But Ephesians 4:28 tells us, let him who steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give to whom who has need. So, we look at this verse, and it talks about work. So, it's the opposite. Don't just steal, stop stealing, but also start working. And I think a lot of times, in the Christian circles, we like to think that work is evil, but the reality is, if you look back to Genesis, Adam was given responsibilities. He was given jobs. He was to maintain the garden, and he was to take care of the animals. That was a job. Now, I personally believe that because everything was perfect and sin hadn't ruined everything yet, I personally believe he didn't get tired. He didn't grow weary from working. But he still worked. Thus meaning that work is not an evil thing. Now, sin has come in and made it difficult, But work itself is not evil, because from the beginning of time, man has worked. And so working is not evil, guys. It is a blessing in some ways that we get to do stuff like that. And I love how it says, working with his hands. And I feel like nowadays there's this weird stigma about people that work in trades or things like that. It doesn't matter what job you do. Just work and do your job well. And as Colossians tells us, as unto the Lord and not to men. And so we need to make sure that we're working hard, and we need to make sure that we're not being lazy or greedy, but that we're working and that we're being content and that we're being givers, that we're willing to give and to help those. And I love how it finishes the verses with, that he may have something to give him who has need. That is a great motivation to work. And, I talked earlier about being content, but still having an ambition. This is what it's talking about, that we might be able to give to others, that we might leave something behind to the generation coming behind us, that we might be able to help those in need around us now. And so I would encourage you, find a charity that you can give to. I would encourage you to not be takers, but givers. I would encourage you to work hard as unto the Lord and not to be lazy or greedy. But overall, make sure that we're honoring God through this and that we're giving back to God what is God's. Because in the way that God has blessed us, we should try to bless others. And in that way, we honor God. So don't steal, honor God. Don't be a taker, but be a giver. Don't be lazy, be a laborer. And that is all I have for you guys today. I thank you for watching my video. This is a little different than the lesson I taught on Sunday, but I feel like this is a little better. We're doing youth group 6:30 to 8 o'clock. If you are a youth or you even know a youth who could benefit from coming, let them know. And we love having new people. We love having friends, and we love having, and if you were in 6th grade last year, but you're going into 7th grade this year, you're more than welcome to come already because you're moving up anyway. Please come out, spend some time with us. We're at Calvary Bible Church, 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Come hang out with me from a safe distance. Anyway, love you guys. Thanks for watching my video. Hope you learned something, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.